Some men destroy everything they touch and then act surprised when the wreckage outlives them. This story is about one of those men, but he's not the one telling it because nobody worth listening to is. My name is Harry James. I'm 54 years old. I teach civics at Westover High School in Greensboro, North Carolina, which means I spend my working days explaining to teenagers how the law is supposed to protect people, why it sometimes fails, and what happens when it finally gets it right. I've been a licensed foster parent in Guilford County for 3 years. The girl who changed my life arrived on a Saturday morning in September 2023 with one duffel bag and a photograph she held like it was the last solid thing in a world that had been coming apart since she was 9 years old. Her name was Nadia, and the man responsible for everything that happened to her was sitting in a state correctional facility in Avery County, North Carolina, serving 12 years for aggravated assault causing serious bodily harm. He thought, when they took his daughter away, that he had won. He was wrong. He just didn't know it yet. Let me take you back to where this actually started. Not September 2023, but October 2018, because that's when a woman named Lena Cole stopped existing, as far as the world was concerned. Lena Cole was 29 years old when her husband, a man named Gary Cole, 34, beat her so severely in the kitchen of their home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that she was transported by ambulance to Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center and spent 11 days in the neurology unit. The injury, a traumatic brain injury caused by blunt force trauma, resulted in a condition her treating physicians documented as post-traumatic dissociative amnesia, a loss of personal identity and autobiographical memory severe enough that when she was discharged to a residential care facility, she could not reliably state her own name. Gary Cole was arrested the same night at the scene. He was charged with felony assault inflicting serious bodily injury under North Carolina General Statute 1432.4. He pled guilty in March 2019, in exchange for a reduced charge, and was sentenced to 12 years in the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction. He is currently incarcerated at Avery Mitchell Correctional Institution in Avery County, with a projected release date in 2031. Their daughter, Nadia Cole, then 9 years old, was in the house when it happened. She was placed into emergency foster care by Forsyth County DSS the following morning. Nadia Cole had been in the system for 5 years by the time her file landed on my kitchen table. The caseworker who brought it was Sandra Oakes, late 40s, practical shoes, the specific composure of a woman who has delivered hard news so many times that she has learned to hold it steady so the person receiving it doesn't have to carry both the news and her reaction at the same time. Sandra placed the folder on my table and let me open it at my own pace. The photograph clipped to the file stopped me cold. A color print, worn soft at the corners from years of handling. The kind of wear that comes from being carried, not stored. It showed a young woman with warm brown eyes and natural hair pinned loosely to one side, standing in front of what looked like a park fence on a bright summer afternoon, holding a small girl on her hip. The woman was laughing at something outside the frame. The little girl, Nadia at 3 or 4 years old, was looking not at the camera, but at her mother, the way children look at the person who is their whole world. She carries it everywhere, Sandra told me. Every placement. It's the first thing she unpacks and the last thing she touches before she sleeps. What happened to her mother? Sandra was quiet for a moment. Lena Cole sustained a traumatic brain injury in October 2018 as a result of domestic violence. She was placed in a long-term residential care facility in High Point after her hospital discharge. She has a documented dissociative condition. She lost her identity, her memory. For a significant period, she could not remember her own name, let alone her daughter's. And the father? Incarcerated. Guilty plea, March 2019. 12-year sentence. So Nadia lost both parents the same night. Sandra looked at me. Yes, that's exactly what happened. I looked at the photograph for another moment, then at the file. At 5 years of placements, school transfers, case reviews. When can she come? Nadia arrived at my house on Carrington Drive in Greensboro's Fisher Park neighborhood on a Saturday morning in mid-September 2023. She stepped out of Sandra's county vehicle in a gray hoodie that was doing double duty as clothing and armor, carried her duffel to the porch, and shook my hand with the grip of someone who had learned that first impressions in foster placements were data, useful, not warm. She was 14 years old, and she had the eyes of someone who had been reading Rooms for Survival since she was 9. I showed her the spare bedroom. Clean sheets, a bookshelf, a window facing the backyard and the tree line beyond it. I left the door open, because that was the detail that mattered most, not the lamp or the books, but the open door that said this space is yours, not mine. She unpacked in under 10 minutes. The photograph went on the nightstand, propped against the base of the lamp, angled toward the room. Not tucked away, watching over things. The first week was a quiet negotiation. She followed every rule without being asked, ate every meal I made, cleared her dishes, thanked me in the practiced way of a kid who had learned that gratitude was a transaction that extended placements. I didn't push conversation. I asked practical questions. She answered in complete sentences. We were both being careful with each other, and that was fine. Careful is how you build something that lasts. What she gave real attention to was the civics textbook I had left on the kitchen counter, the AP Government edition I used for my 11th grade class. I'd set it there because I'd been reviewing the chapter order. She picked it up one evening, while I made dinner, flipped to the section on the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, and read for 45 minutes without moving. Nadia looked up from the page. It says the government can't take life, liberty, or property without due process, but it doesn't say anything about what happens when the person taking those things isn't the government. I stopped stirring. You're right, it doesn't. So what do you do then? I didn't know in that moment that she wasn't asking a hypothetical question. She was asking from inside the answer. Sometimes you wait for the law to catch up, and sometimes it does. She closed the textbook, put it back on the counter exactly where she'd found it, and walked to the table for dinner without another word. 3 weeks after Nadia arrived, my brother came for dinner. His name is Dominic James, Dom, 51 years old, licensed professional counselor in private practice on Elm Street in downtown Greensboro. Before his private practice, he spent 7 years doing contract work with Guilford County's youth outreach program, part of which involved weekly sessions at a women's residential support facility in High Point. Dom and I have dinner every few weeks. He brings wine. I cook. We talk about things that matter and a few that don't. That Friday evening in early October 2023, I made pasta. Nadia ate with us and was, as usual, quiet but present. She'd begun to occupy the same space without needing it to mean anything, which was progress she wasn't tracking, but I was. After dinner, she excused herself to do homework. Dom and I moved to the front porch with coffee. About 20 minutes in, the screen door opened. Nadia stood in the doorway. She had the photograph in her hand, not clutched, just held like she'd picked it up without planning to bring it outside. She looked at me. Can I show you something? Of course. She stepped onto the porch and held out the photograph. I looked at it properly for the first time. The laughing woman. The summer light. Little Nadia on her hip, eyes only for her mother. That's my mom, Nadia said. Her name is Lena. She's been gone since I was 9. She's beautiful, I told her. You look just like her. Something crossed Nadia's face, fast, unguarded. There and gone. Do you think she's still out there somewhere? I thought about that before answering. I think the world is smaller than it looks sometimes, and people who are lost sometimes get found. She looked at the photograph for another beat, then went back inside. I turned to Dom. He was staring at the screen door. He had gone the color of a man who has just walked into a room and found something he was not remotely prepared for. Dom. He didn't answer. Dom. What's wrong? He turned to me slowly. His voice, when it came, was steady, the professional steadiness he'd spent 20 years building. But underneath it, something was moving fast. Can I see that photograph? I went inside and knocked softly on Nadia's door. She handed over the photograph without hesitation, which told me the 3 weeks had meant something even if she wouldn't have said so. I brought it back to the porch and gave it to Dom. He took it in both hands, held it toward the porch light, his jaw set in the way it sets when he is processing something he cannot yet speak. Hairy, measured, careful. Where did Sandra say Lena was from? Winston-Salem. Her name is Lena Cole. She went missing in October 2018. That's how the Forsyth County Missing Persons file reads it. Her husband put her in the hospital that night. Traumatic brain injury. He pled guilty in 2019, got 12 years. But Lena, after the hospital discharged her, she disappeared into the system. Forsyth County flagged her missing, but never located her. Nobody knew where she ended up. Dom set the photograph very carefully on the porch railing between us. Dom leaned forward. His voice dropped into the careful, measured register he used when something needed to be said precisely and within limits. When I was doing county contract work, I spent nearly 2 years working Thursday mornings at a women's residential care facility in High Point. There was a woman I worked with for most of that time. She came in without any identification. She had no memory of who she was. The staff gave her a working name because she couldn't provide one. She had injuries consistent with significant trauma, documented by the ER. And over the time I worked with her, memory began to return in pieces. Fragments. A little girl. A name she couldn't quite reach. He stopped. Set the photograph back on the railing between us. Harry, I cannot tell you her name. I cannot tell you the details of her case. What I can tell you is that the woman in that photograph, that smile, I sat across a table from her every Thursday morning for almost 2 years. Everything on that porch went completely still. My chest had gone cold. Are you certain? No, not from a photograph in porch light, but close enough that I can't sit here and not say it. His eyes were steady on mine. We need to find out. Tomorrow. I looked at the screen door. On the other side of it, a 14-year-old girl was doing her homework with a worn photograph on her nightstand and a question she'd been carrying for 5 years. Is she still out there somewhere? Tomorrow. I didn't sleep. Not because the possibility felt unlikely. It didn't. The geography alone was staggering in its cruelty. Lena Cole, documented missing in Forsyth County, found 18 miles away in Guilford County, admitted to a care facility under a name she couldn't give them because the man who had put her there had taken her memory along with everything else. 2 counties, 2 separate record systems, no automatic cross-reference, no alert that triggered, no mechanism that connected a missing persons case in Winston-Salem to an unidentified trauma patient in High Point. Gary Cole had hit his wife hard enough to erase her identity, and the system's gaps had finished the job without even knowing it. I lay in the dark and thought about that man in his prison cell in Avery County. I thought about the fact that his sentence, 12 years, guilty plea, meant he had believed he was managing the damage. Plea it down. Serve the time. Come out the other side, and what was left? A daughter in the system. A wife who didn't even know her own name. A clean slate by his arithmetic. His arithmetic was wrong. He just didn't know the mistake yet. At 6:30 a.m. I was at the kitchen table. At 7 o'clock, Dom called. His voice was already in work mode. Careful, structured, the professional container he used when the situation required precision over feeling. I can't go to the recovery center and name a patient. HIPAA applies regardless of circumstance. What I can do is call Dr. Karen Tate. She's been the clinical director there for 6 years. I know her professionally. And describe the situation without identifying anyone. Ask her to initiate an internal conversation. And if it's her, then we do this correctly. Sandra Oaks gets called. DSS gets involved. Forsyth County's Missing Persons Unit gets the connection they've been missing for 5 years. Nobody does anything fast or dramatic, because fast and dramatic in a situation involving a traumatic brain injury survivor and a child who's been in foster care for 5 years causes damage that takes years to undo. I understand. And Harry, do not tell Nadia. Not one word. Not until we have something confirmed and verified and properly scaffolded. If this falls apart before it's real, the damage to her will be... I know. I won't say anything. I hung up and walked down the hall. Nadia's door was open. She was already dressed, sitting at her desk with the civics textbook open, the 14th Amendment chapter again. The photograph was on the nightstand. Same angle. Same watch. Morning. Without turning around. Morning. Eggs or cereal? Eggs, please. I went back to the kitchen and made eggs and did not say a word about what was sitting in my chest like a live wire. Dom called Dr. Tate at 9 a.m. Saturday. He called me back at 11:23. She knows who I'm talking about. Steady. But there was something in the quality of the steadiness, the effort of it, She can't confirm identity to me directly, but she asked 3 questions, carefully chosen. The answers I gave her clearly landed. She's going to initiate a conversation with the patient and call me back. How was she? The patient. How is she doing? A pause. Dr. Tate indicated the woman has made significant progress over the past 2 years. Her memory has been returning with increasing reliability. She's been asking about a daughter, consistently for the last 18 months. They haven't been able to locate the child through the information she's been able to provide because the name she remembered didn't immediately match the Forsyth County case records. Different spelling variations, different last name, and nobody had thought to cross-reference with Guilford County. Different spelling variations. 5 years of a little girl sleeping with a photograph on her nightstand, 18 miles away from a woman who was asking about her, and the gap between them was a spelling variation in a database. How long until Dr. Tate calls back? End of day, Dom said. She'll call me. I thanked him and went back to the kitchen, where Nadia was now at the counter reading a library book about the Apollo 13 mission. She'd checked it out Tuesday and was on her second read-through. Nadia kept her eyes on the page. They used the lunar module as a lifeboat, 3 astronauts only designed for 2. 4 days to travel. The math didn't work on paper, but they figured out how to solve each problem as it came. That's good engineering. That's good survival. She turned a page. My mom used to say that when something breaks, you don't panic about the whole thing. You fix the first problem, then the next one. Panicking is what happens when you're trying to solve all the problems at once. I looked at her. She remembered that. 5 years later, and she still had her mother's voice in her head. Your mom sounds like she was smart. Nadia was quiet for a moment. She was, the word she chose. The tense that children in her situation learn to use when the alternative feels too fragile to say out loud. I turned back to the stove and did not say what I knew. Dr. Tate called Dom at 5:31 p.m. The woman admitted in October 2018 as Jane Doe, who had been working for the past 2 years under the name Lena, because fragments of her own name had been among the first memories to surface, had confirmed, in a facilitated conversation with Dr. Tate, that she believed her full name was Lena Cole. She remembered Winston-Salem. She remembered a daughter named Nadia. She remembered the kitchen. She remembered the night. She had not forgotten what Gary Cole did to her. That memory, it turned out, had never fully left. It had just been buried under everything else he had taken. Dom's voice, when he called me, was doing the same controlled thing it had been doing all day. It's her, Harry. Dr. Tate is satisfied she's going to initiate the formal identification process on their end. I'll call Sandra now. I walked to the back porch. The October evening in Greensboro was warm enough to stand in without a jacket, the tree line behind the yard catching the last of the light. I thought about Gary Cole in Avery Mitchell Correctional Institution, 120 miles east of where I was standing. I thought about him on the night of October 2018, standing in that kitchen in Winston-Salem, believing that what he had done would define the rest of the story, that Lena would be lost, that Nadia would be absorbed into a system and forgotten, that the damage would hold. He had been sitting in that cell for 5 years while his daughter built herself into someone extraordinary, and his wife fought her way back from something that would have ended most people. And he didn't know any of it. He thought he had won. He thought it was over. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. I called Sandra. Sandra Oakes arrived at my house on Wednesday evening, October 11th, 2023, with Dom beside her and a file on the table and the careful, level face of a woman about to deliver the most significant news of a child's life. I picked Nadia up from school at 3:15. Normal drive. Normal conversation. She was telling me about a disagreement between 2 of her teachers that had apparently been playing out through their competing assignment deadlines, narrated with the precise comedic timing of someone who had been observing adult dysfunction long enough to develop an appreciation for it. She saw Sandra's car in the driveway before we turned off the engine. Who's here? Sandra. And Dom. I turned off the car and looked at her. We need to talk to you about something important. Before we go in, nobody is in trouble. Nothing bad is happening. Okay? She looked at the driveway. Reading the calculation. Okay. Sandra didn't pad it. That was the right call. Nadia was not a child who needed soft landings. She needed truth, delivered clearly by someone who respected her enough not to dress it up. I have news about your mother, about Lena. The kitchen was completely still. We believe your mother is alive. She's in a care facility in High Point, 18 miles from here. She's been there since the night your father was arrested. Nadia did not move. Her hands, flat on the table, pressed slowly downward. She was very badly hurt. Sandra continued. What your father did to her caused a brain injury that affected her memory. For a long time she didn't know who she was or where she'd come from. But she's been getting better, and she's been asking about you. 15 seconds of silence. She didn't leave me. Not a question, a verdict. The verdict of a 14-year-old who had been carrying the unbearable possibility that her mother had chosen to go, who had been performing the math of abandonment against herself for 5 years. No. Sandra's voice was absolute. She did not leave you. She was hurt so badly she couldn't find her way back. But she never stopped trying. Nadia put her face in her hands. She didn't make a sound. She sat at that table in absolute silence while Sandra and Dom and I held the room around her and let it be what it was. Because some moments are not for managing, they're for surviving. And she was surviving this one the same way she had survived every other one, with more grace than anyone had a right to expect. When she looked up, her eyes were wet and her voice was back under control. He put her there. Not a question, either. Yes, Sandra said. Your father did this. What happened to your mother was a direct result of what he did to her that night. He is in prison. He has been since 2019. Nadia nodded once. Slow. Processing. Can I see her? Yes. We're going to arrange that carefully, with the right support in place. It's going to take a little time to do it properly. But yes. Nadia reached into the front pocket of her hoodie and placed the photograph on the table between them. She looked at it for a long moment, at the laughing woman, at the summer light, at little Nadia on her mother's hip looking up at the only world that had ever felt safe. She's been 18 miles away this whole time. Not accusation, just the geography of it. Yes. Another long silence. Then Nadia picked up the photograph. Held it the way she always held it. What do I need to do? The first visit with Lena Cole happened on Saturday, October 21st, 2023, 10 days after we told Nadia the truth. The Guilford Women's Recovery Center on English Road in High Point was a clean, well-maintained facility set back from the road behind a landscaped entrance. The staff were professional and deliberate. They had managed Lena's care for 5 years, and they understood better than anyone what this reunion meant and how carefully it needed to be held. A counselor named Patrice met us at the door, introduced herself to Nadia specifically, walked us down the hallway to the family visiting room, where a round table sat near a window that looked out over a small courtyard garden. Lena Cole was already inside. She was 34 years old. She had been 29 the night Gary Cole took everything from her. And the 5 years showed in the way that 5 years of hard recovery show on a person. Honestly, without apology. She was thinner than the photograph. Her natural hair was shorter, pulled back simply. She had the deliberate stillness of someone who had learned, through years of slow and painful work, how to be present in her own body again. When the door opened and Nadia walked in, Lena stood up, and for one suspended moment, every protocol and every carefully prepared boundary and every clinical framework fell completely away. It was just a mother and her daughter looking at each other across a room they had been kept from for 5 years by a man who had believed from his prison cell that he had made sure this moment would never happen. Nadia crossed the room. Lena held her. I stood in the hallway with Patrice and did not go in because that room belonged to the two of them. Through the small window in the door I could see Lena with her eyes closed and her arms around her daughter. Her whole posture doing the thing a person's posture does when they are finally holding what they have been reaching toward for so long that reaching had become the only thing they knew how to do. Patrice looked at me. You doing okay? Working on it. She nodded. She'd seen this before. She understood that sometimes the people in the hallway need a moment too. I want to stop here and be direct about something, because this channel is about consequences, and the consequence at the center of this story is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a confrontation or a courtroom scene. It arrives quietly in a family visiting room in High Point, North Carolina, on a Saturday morning in October. Gary Cole beat his wife so badly that she lost herself. He did it in front of his daughter. He went to prison, and while he was there, while he sat in Avery Mitchell Correctional Institution serving out his 12 years, his wife fought her way back from a brain injury that would have ended most people. His daughter was raised by a stranger who treated her better than Gary Cole ever had. And the two of them, Lena and Nadia, found each other 18 miles apart through a photograph that a little girl had carried every single day for 5 years. Gary Cole thought he had destroyed two people. What he actually did was set in motion the chain of events that built a life without him that was better than anything he could have offered with him. That is the revenge. Not a phone call, not a letter, not a visit, just a life, full, healing, growing that he will never be part of. A woman who recovered, a daughter who thrived, a family that formed without him. And despite him, he's still in Avery Mitchell. His release date is 2031. By then, Nadia will be 26 years old. Lena will have had years of her life on her own terms, years he will never be part of, never be invited into, never be able to touch. I hope he thinks about that. The visits between Nadia and Lena continued every other Saturday through the fall and into winter. Patrice was present for the first 4. By December, Nadia and Lena were meeting without a counselor in the room, which Dr. Tate said was a meaningful benchmark. It meant Lena's stability was reliable enough to hold the relationship without clinical scaffolding. They rebuilt the way people rebuild after something catastrophic, not systematically but in pieces. Small, true pieces. Lena remembered that Nadia had always counted her food before eating it as a toddler. Grapes, peas, crackers, always counted. Nadia remembered that her mother sang off-key to the radio in the car and never cared. She remembered vanilla lotion in a brown bottle. She remembered the pancakes her mother made on Sunday mornings, shaped imprecisely into circles that Lena always called stars regardless. These specific, ordinary, irreplaceable memories are what a relationship is actually made of. Not the grand gestures, the counted grapes and the off-key singing and the imprecise pancakes. Gary Cole had tried to take all of it. He hadn't managed to take enough. As for me, I want to be honest about how my own part of this story developed, because it didn't happen the way it might in a movie. It happened slowly, carefully, with a lot of conversation and a significant amount of time. I met Lena for the first time on the day of that initial visit, briefly, in the hallway after Nadia came out. She shook my hand, looked me in the eye. "Sandra told me what you did for Nadia. Thank you." It was a plain sentence. She meant every word of it in the way that people mean things when they've been stripped of the ability to say anything they don't mean. She's remarkable, I told her. She got through 5 years on her own terms. That's all her. Lena looked at me for a moment. She didn't have to be alone. We left it there, because that was enough for that day. Over the following months, as Nadia's visits became Nadia and Harry's visits, and then occasional dinners at the facility's family space, and eventually, when Lena's treatment team approved supervised outings in early 2024, afternoons at parks and coffee shops, and the kind of ordinary places that feel extraordinary when you've been denied them for 5 years, I got to know Lena Cole. Not as a case, not as a story, as a person. She was funny, which I hadn't expected. A dry, quick wit that Nadia had clearly inherited, the kind of humor that treats absurdity as the correct response to a world that frequently deserves it. She was direct. She was honest about her recovery in the matter-of-fact way of someone who has decided that pretending is too expensive. She had opinions about things and stated them without apology. She was rebuilding her life from the foundation with the same problem-by-problem methodology she had apparently been passing on to her daughter since before Nadia could count grapes. I didn't fall in love with her story. I fell in love with her. And I want to be clear about the timeline because I know how this sounds and I know the questions it raises. I am not the kind of man who moves fast on anything. I was not going to introduce complexity into a recovery that was still finding its footing, or into a relationship between a mother and daughter that needed every available square inch of space. Dom and I talked about it extensively. Dr. Tate was transparent with me about what Lena's treatment team would and would not support at various stages. Sandra weighed in on what would and would not be appropriate relative to Nadia's placement. It took time. It was supposed to take time, Lena moved into a supported independent living apartment in High Point in January 2025, under the ongoing care of Dr. Tate's outreach team. She had a job, part-time administrative work at a medical billing office, that she had started in November 2024 and was, according to her own account, excellent at, which nobody who had met her was surprised to hear. Nadia's DSS case was reviewed in February 2025. The formal reunification process, supervised, structured, measured, began that month, with a projected timeline of 12 to 18 months before Nadia could transition back to living with her mother. Sandra managed the process with the same careful precision she brought to everything. On the evening of March 4th, 2025, Nadia's 16th birthday, Lena came to my house on Carrington Drive for the first time. Dom was there. Sandra came by for the first hour. We had dinner and cake, and Nadia opened gifts and argued with Dom about something she'd read in a book about constitutional law, which Dom lost because Nadia is better at it than he is and always has been. At some point after dinner, Lena and I were in the kitchen while the others were in the living room, and she was helping me stack dishes without being asked, and she spoke without preamble, the way she always did. I want you to know that whatever happens next, I know what you gave her. You gave her 5 years of someone showing up. I can't. She stopped, set a plate down, picked it back up. I can't give those years back, but I know who held them while they were gone. I looked at her. I thought about a man in a prison cell in Avery County who had been certain, 5 years ago, that the story ended the way he wrote it. He hadn't counted on any of this. She held them herself. She's remarkable, Lena. She was remarkable before I got there. She is. A pause. So are you. She went back to the living room. I stood in the kitchen for a moment and made a decision. Dom was the first person I told. His response, about time, which is not the answer of a man who was surprised. Sandra's reaction when I called her the following week was more formal, but the warmth underneath it was visible. Sandra chose her words with care. From a professional standpoint, there are considerations around the timing relative to Nadia's reunification process, but from every other standpoint, a pause. Harry, you found her. You kept her daughter safe. I think you've earned the right to have a conversation. The conversation happened on an April evening in 2025 at a small restaurant on Elm Street in downtown Greensboro, 2 blocks from Dom's office. We had coffee afterward. We walked back to the parking garage, and I told Lena that I was in love with her, and that I was not in any hurry, and that she owed me nothing, and that I just needed her to know. She was quiet for a moment. Then those direct, clear eyes found mine, the eyes that never performed anything. I know. I've known for a while. I was waiting to make sure I was choosing from a position of strength, not need, not gratitude. And I'm choosing. That's different from needing. That's different from needing. From a woman who had spent 5 years fighting to be a self again, to know her own mind, trust her own judgment, stand on her own ground, those 4 words were the clearest possible declaration of what she had become. We were married in October 2025, a small ceremony. Nadia stood beside her mother. Dom stood beside me. The officiant was a county magistrate who had a good face for occasions that meant something. We didn't do it big or loud. We did it real. As of December 2025, as I'm finishing this account, here is where things stand. Nadia Cole is 16 years old, in 10th grade at Westover High, which means she walks through the same building where I teach without being in my class, which we have both agreed is an arrangement that benefits everyone. She is on the debate team. She is, according to her coach, the most prepared and most dangerous debater he has coached in 12 years of coaching, which tracks completely. She is in the early stages of the DSS reunification process that will, within the next year, allow her to move back in with her mother. Lena James, she took my name, her choice, stated without drama, is 36 years old. She goes to weekly outpatient sessions with Dr. Tate's team. She works 4 days a week at the billing office and is apparently faster than the software. She sings off-key in the car. She makes pancakes on Sunday mornings that she still insists on calling stars, even though Nadia, at 16, points out they are clearly circles. She is the most deliberate and clear-eyed person I have ever known, and I have known her from the position of someone who watched her build herself back from something that would have ended most people, and I am in awe of her every single day. Gary Cole is at Avery Mitchell Correctional Institution. His release date is 2031, roughly 5 years from now. Nadia will be 22 by then. Lena will have had 5 more years of a life that he has no part of. I will have been married to her for 6 years by that point, and I will, if things go the way I expect them to, have helped raise his daughter into the kind of woman who argues constitutional law for fun and makes her own decisions about who deserves her time. He has missed everything. He will continue to miss everything. That is not a threat, not a warning, not a letter anyone is sending him. It is simply the arithmetic of what happens when you try to destroy people who refuse to stay destroyed. I teach civics. I explain to teenagers every day how the law is supposed to work, where it fails, and what happens when it gets things right. I tell them that systems are imperfect, but that people inside systems can sometimes close the gaps. If they're paying attention, if they're willing to act on what they see, if they don't look at a broken situation and decide it's someone else's problem. A man named Gary Cole sat in a kitchen in Winston-Salem in October 2018 and believed that violence was power, that if you hit hard enough you could decide how the story ended. He was wrong about that. The story ended on a Saturday morning in October 2023 in a family visiting room in High Point, when a 14-year-old girl with a worn photograph walked through a door and found her mother on the other side of it. That's where it ended for him. For us, that's where it started. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.